The morning sun painted golden streaks across the marble floors of the mansion, but inside the grand estate, darkness seemed to have settled permanently. Sat at her vanity table, staring at her reflection with hollow eyes that had lost their sparkle years ago. Her once beautiful face showed the strain of sleepless nights and endless worries that money couldn't solve. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway as Grace Washington made her way to his bedroom. Grace had worked for the family for 15 years, watching their empire grow and their happiness shrink. She carried a silver tray with breakfast, though she knew would barely touch it. These days, the woman lived on coffee and anxiety pills. Grace knocked gently on the door before entering, didn't even turn around. She just sat there, brushing her hair mechanically, her movements robotic and empty. The room smelled of expensive perfume mixed with the bitter scent of despair. "Good morning, Mrs." Grace said softly, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "I brought your breakfast and the morning papers." His laugh was sharp and bitter. "Papers? You mean more stories about how my husband's business is failing, how we're losing everything we built, how my children hate us?" She finally turned around, and Grace saw the deep circles under her eyes. "What's good about any of this morning, Grace?" Grace had seen many wealthy families during her years of service, but none had fallen as hard as the. Richard had built his fortune in real estate and technology investments, creating an empire worth billions. But in the last 2 years, everything had started crumbling. Bad investments, market crashes, and poor decisions had eaten away at their wealth like a cancer. The real tragedy wasn't the money, though. Grace had watched this family tear itself apart from the inside. Richard barely came home anymore, spending his days desperately trying to save his failing businesses and his nights drinking away his failures. Their 2 children, Emma and James, had become strangers in their own home. Emma, who was 22, had dropped out of college and spent her time partying with friends who only cared about her family's money. James, 18, had turned to drugs and anger, blaming his parents for everything wrong in his life. "Mrs." Grace said carefully, "maybe you should eat something, you're getting too thin." Waved her hand dismissively. "What's the point? We'll probably be homeless soon anyway." She picked up one of the newspapers from the tray and her face went pale. "Oh God, not again." The headline read, "Empire Crumbles, Billionaire Faces Bankruptcy as Family Fortune Disappears." Below it was a photo of Richard looking haggard as he left a courthouse. Grace watched hands shake as she read the article. The woman who had once hosted elegant dinner parties for hundreds of guests now couldn't even hold a newspaper steady. The transformation was heartbreaking to witness. "They're saying Richard owes over $200 million to various investors," whispered. "They're calling him a fraud. They're saying he stole money from pension funds and charities." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "How did we get here, Grace? How did everything go so wrong?" Grace had been asking herself the same question for months. She remembered when they were the perfect family. Richard was ambitious but honest, was kind and generous, and the children were polite and well-behaved. They had donated millions to charities, supported local schools, and treated their staff like family. But success had changed them gradually. Richard became obsessed with making more money, taking bigger risks, and competing with other billionaires. Got caught up in the social scene, spending fortunes on parties and luxury items she didn't need. The children grew up spoiled, never learning the value of hard work or genuine relationships. "Mrs." Grace said gently, sitting down in the chair across from her employer, "I've been with this family for 15 years. I've seen you at your best, and I'm seeing you at your worst. But I need to tell you something, and you might not like hearing it." Looked up surprised. Grace had always been respectful and quiet, never speaking unless spoken to. This was different. "What is it, Grace?" "This family is dying, and it's not because of money problems. You're all so focused on what you've lost that you've forgotten what you still have. You have each other, but you're acting like strangers. You have your health, but you're slowly killing yourselves with stress and bad choices. You have a chance to rebuild, but you're too busy feeling sorry for yourselves to see it." His eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you? You work for us. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. You don't understand the pressure we're under." Grace stood up slowly, her dark eyes steady and calm. "You're right, Mrs. I don't know what it's like to lose billions of dollars, but I do know what it's like to lose the things that really matter. I lost my husband in Iraq when he was serving our country. I lost my daughter to cancer when she was only 16. I know what real loss feels like, and this isn't it." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Stared at Grace, shocked by the woman's honesty. In 15 years, Grace had never spoken about her personal life, never complained, never shown anything but professional kindness. When I lost my family, Grace continued, I wanted to die. I had nothing left, no money saved, no family to help me. But a kind woman gave me a job in her home, and slowly I learned that life isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what's left. You still have your husband, even if he's making mistakes. You still have your children, even if they're angry and confused. You still have each other. His anger was fading, replaced by something she hadn't felt in months: shame. She realized that while she'd been crying about losing money, Grace had been working quietly, taking care of a family that barely noticed her, dealing with her own grief while helping others. I watch Mr. come home every night, Grace said. He looks like a broken man, but instead of finding comfort in his family, he finds more stress. I watch Emma stumble in at dawn, drunk and empty, searching for something she'll never find at those parties. I watch James get angrier every day, pushing away everyone who tries to help him. And I watch you, Mrs., disappearing a little more each day. Wiped her eyes with a tissue from the vanity table. I don't know how to fix this, Grace. I don't know how to help my family when I can barely help myself. It starts with stopping, Grace said firmly. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Stop blaming others. Stop pretending that money will solve your problems. Your family doesn't need a billionaire father or a perfect mother or expensive things. They need parents who love them and show them how to be strong. Downstairs, they could hear the front door slam shut. Richard was leaving for another day of meetings with lawyers and creditors, another day of trying to save what couldn't be saved. He hadn't even said goodbye to his wife. He won't even look at me anymore, whispered. He blames me for some of the spending, for the pressure I put on him to maintain our lifestyle. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am part of the problem. Grace sat back down and took his hands in hers. Mrs., blame won't fix anything. What matters now is what you do next. Your husband is drowning in guilt and fear. Your children are lost and angry. You can either let this family sink completely, or you can start fighting for what's really important. Looked at their joined hands. Grace's hands were strong and calloused from years of hard work, while her own were soft from a lifetime of luxury. She realized she'd never really noticed Grace as a person before, never asked about her life or shown genuine interest in her. Tell me about your daughter, said quietly. Grace's eyes softened. Sarah was the light of my life. She was smart, funny, and kind. When she got sick, she never complained. She spent her last months writing letters to other sick children, trying to make them smile. She taught me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway. I'm afraid, admitted. I'm terrified that we'll lose everything. I'm scared that my children will never forgive us for failing them. I'm afraid that Richard will leave me. Fear is normal, Grace said. But you can't let it control you. Your family needs you to be strong now. They need you to show them that love is more important than money, that family is more valuable than reputation. Stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the beautiful gardens that Grace maintained, the swimming pool where her children used to play, and the tennis court where she and Richard once spent happy Sunday mornings. All of it might be gone soon, sold to pay debts and legal fees. What if it's too late? Asked. What if we've already lost each other? Grace joined her at the window. It's only too late when you stop trying. Your family is broken, but broken things can be fixed if you're willing to put in the work. You just have to decide if you love them enough to fight for them. That afternoon found herself doing something she hadn't done in months. She left her bedroom. She walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in years. The walls were covered with expensive art, but there were no family photos. The rooms were perfectly decorated by professional designers, but they felt cold and unwelcoming. This wasn't a home, it was a showplace. She made her way to James's room and knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again and called his name. Finally, she heard movement inside. Go away, came her son's muffled voice. Tried the door and found it unlocked. James was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His room was a mess, and she could smell marijuana in the air. Her 18-year-old son looked like he hadn't slept in days. James, we need to talk. He didn't even look at her. About what? About how Dad's a failure, about how we're going to be poor, about how my friends at school are already making jokes about our family. I know all of that already, Mom. Sat down on the edge of his bed, ignoring his obvious wish to be left alone. I want to talk about how I've failed you. That got his attention. James sat up and looked at her with surprised eyes. "I've been so caught up in our problems that I forgot I have a son who's hurting," continued. "I've been so worried about money that I stopped being your mother. I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry for not seeing how much pain you're in." James's tough expression cracked slightly. "It doesn't matter, Mom. Nothing matters anymore. Everything I thought my life would be is gone. College, career plans, everything. Who am I supposed to be now?" "You're supposed to be my son," said simply. "You're supposed to be a young man who learns from his parents' mistakes and builds something better. You're supposed to be someone who doesn't give up when things get hard." For the first time in months, James looked directly at his mother. She looked different somehow, more real than the perfectly polished woman he was used to seeing. "I'm scared, Mom," he admitted quietly. "I don't know how to handle this. All my friends come from money. I don't know how to be poor. I don't know how to face people when they know we're failures." Reached out and hugged her son, something she realized she hadn't done in far too long. "We're not failures, James. We're people who made mistakes and lost money. That's not the same thing." As the day went on, tried to reach out to Emma as well, but her daughter wasn't home. According to Grace, Emma had been staying at friends' houses more often lately, avoiding the tension at home. Realized she didn't even know which friends or where Emma was most of the time. When Richard came home that evening, was waiting for him in his study. He looked exhausted and defeated, his expensive suit wrinkled from a long day of disappointing meetings. "I can't talk right now," he said without looking at her. "I have calls to make, papers to review. The lawyers think they might have found a way to save the company, but it means selling everything else. The house, the cars, everything." "Richard, sit down." Something in her voice made him stop and look at her. She was sitting in his favorite chair, but she looked different, more present somehow. "We need to talk about our family." Richard laughed bitterly. "What family? James hates me. Emma won't even come home. You barely speak to me. I've destroyed everything, everything I worked for, everything I built for us. I'm a failure." "You're my husband," said firmly. "You're the father of my children. You're a man who took risks, and some of them didn't work out. That doesn't make you a failure." Richard stared at her, surprised by her certainty. For months, she had been just as defeated as he was, just as lost in despair. "Grace talked to me today," continued. "She helped me understand something important. We've been so focused on what we've lost that we've forgotten what we still have. We still have each other, Richard. We still have our children. We still have a chance to show them that love is more important than money." Richard sat down heavily in the chair across from her. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to face our children and admit that their father is a failure. I don't know how to tell them that everything they thought they could count on is gone." "Then we learn together," said. "We figure it out together, but we stop running away from each other. We stop letting shame and fear destroy what's left of our family." That night, for the first time in months, Richard and had dinner together. Grace served them in the smaller dining room instead of the formal one, and they talked about their children, their mistakes, and their fears. It wasn't easy, and there were tears, but it was honest. They were still talking when Emma came home at midnight, clearly drunk and unsteady on her feet. She stopped in the doorway of the dining room, surprised to see her parents together. "Well, this is new," she slurred. "Are you two actually talking to each other?" "Emma, come sit with us," said gently. "I don't think so. I'm not in the mood for another lecture about responsibility and family values." Emma started to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Emma, please, we know we've made mistakes. We know we've let you down. But we love you and we want to try to make things better." Emma turned around and could see the pain in her daughter's eyes beneath the alcohol and attitude. "Better, Dad, we're broke. Everyone at school knows it. My friends are already treating me differently. Some of them won't even return my calls because they think I'll ask them for money." Emma's voice broke. "I don't know who I am without all of this. I don't know how to be normal." Stood up and walked to her daughter. "Then we'll figure it out together, all of us." As the clock struck 1 in the morning, the family sat together for the first time, and Mo the next morning brought no magical transformation. But something had shifted in the household. Woke up before dawn, not because of anxiety, but because she had made a decision. She found Grace in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as she had every morning for 15 years. "Grace, I need to ask you something," said, surprising the older woman who wasn't used to seeing her employer up so early. "Of course, Mrs." Yesterday you said some hard things to me, things I needed to hear. I want you to keep doing that. I want you to tell me the truth, even when it hurts. Will you help me save my family?" Grace studied his face carefully. "Are you sure you're ready to hear the truth? Because the truth is that this family has been broken for years, long before the money problems started. The truth is that you and Mr. created spoiled children who don't know how to face real problems. The truth is that you've all forgotten how to love each other without conditions." Felt the sting of those words, but she didn't back down. "Tell me how to fix it." "It starts with actions, not words. Your children don't believe anything you say right now because you've made too many empty promises before. You have to show them who you really are when everything else is stripped away." That afternoon did something that shocked everyone. She fired the entire staff except Grace. The cook, the gardener, the cleaning crew, the driver, everyone was given generous severance packages and excellent references, but they were let go. "Mom, what are you doing?" Emma asked, finding her mother in the kitchen wearing an apron and trying to figure out how to use the stove. "I'm learning how to take care of my family," replied, burning what was supposed to be scrambled eggs. James appeared in the doorway, attracted by the smell of smoke. "Are you actually trying to cook?" "Trying is the key word," laughed, scraping the burnt eggs into the garbage. "I realize I don't know how to do basic things, things I should have learned years ago." Richard came home that evening to find his family in the kitchen together. Was still struggling with dinner, Grace was patiently teaching her, Emma was setting the table, and James was actually helping instead of hiding in his room. "What's happening here?" he asked, genuinely confused. "We're learning how to be a real family," said, flour in her hair and sauce on her apron. "Grace is teaching me to cook. The kids are helping. We're going to eat dinner together every night from now on, even if I burn everything." Richard set down his briefcase and loosened his tie. "We can't afford to let the staff go right now. The house is too big to maintain without help." "Then maybe the house is too big," said quietly. The room fell silent. The idea of selling their home had been discussed with lawyers as a possibility, but no one had said it out loud as a choice. "What are you saying?" Emma asked nervously. Looked around at her family. "I'm saying that maybe we need to decide what really matters. This house is beautiful, but it's not what makes us a family. These things are expensive, but they're not what makes us happy." "You want to sell our home?" James asked, his voice rising. "I want us to make decisions together instead of letting other people decide for us," replied. "I want us to choose what we keep and what we let go." Richard sat down at the kitchen table, something he hadn't done in years. "The lawyers say we might be able to keep the house if we sell everything else and I declare personal bankruptcy. But it would mean living here with no money for maintenance, no staff, no cars, just the house." Grace, who had been quietly helping with dinner, finally spoke up. "May I say something?" Everyone looked at her, remembering how her words had started this conversation the day before. "I've worked in many houses for many families. The happiest families I knew lived in small apartments and cooked together every night. The most miserable families lived in mansions and barely spoke to each other. A house is just walls and rooms. A home is where people love each other." Emma sat down across from her father. "So what are you saying? That we should sell everything and be happy about being poor?" "I'm saying you should decide what kind of people you want to be," Grace replied. "Do you want to be people who measure their worth by their bank account, or do you want to be people who measure their worth by how they treat each other?" The conversation continued through dinner, which was simple but made with love. They talked about options, fears, and dreams they hadn't shared in years. Emma admitted she had dropped out of college not because of family problems, but because she didn't know what she wanted to study. James confessed that he had been using drugs because he felt pressure to be perfect like his father. Richard opened up about his business failures, explaining how his desire to compete with other billionaires had led him to make increasingly risky investments. He told his family about the constant stress, the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of knowing that thousands of people might lose their jobs because of his mistakes. "I thought providing for you meant giving you everything money could buy," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought being a good father meant making sure you never had to worry about anything, but I created children who can't handle problems because they've never had to face real challenges." Over the following weeks, the family began a difficult journey of discovering who they were beneath their wealth. Learned to cook, clean, and manage a household without staff. It was hard work and she made many mistakes, but Grace was patient and encouraging. Emma started spending more time at home, helping her mother and talking about her future. She realized that many of her friendships had been based on money and social status rather than genuine connection. It was painful to discover, but also freeing. James began working with Richard, learning about the business and helping with damage control. Instead of hiding from the family's problems, he started understanding them. He learned about investments, legal issues, and the real consequences of financial decisions. Richard started coming home earlier, choosing family time over endless business meetings that weren't solving anything anyway. He began teaching his children practical skills they had never needed before: how to budget money, how to research colleges they could afford, how to apply for jobs. But the biggest change was in how they communicated. Grace had established a new rule: every evening after dinner, the family would spend 1 hour together with no phones, no television, and no business talk. They would just talk to each other about their day, their feelings, and their plans. These conversations weren't always easy. There were arguments, tears, and moments when old patterns of blame and defensiveness resurfaced. But they kept trying, and slowly, trust began to rebuild. One evening, about a month after Grace's first confrontation with, the family was having their usual after-dinner talk when Emma brought up a difficult topic. "I've been thinking about what Grace said about choosing what kind of people we want to be," Emma began. "I think I've been a terrible person for a long time." "Emma, that's not true," protested. "Yes, it is, Mom. I treated people badly because I thought I was better than them because of our money. I was mean to kids at school who couldn't afford expensive clothes. I never thanked Grace or any of the staff for taking care of us. I acted like I deserved special treatment just for being born into this family." James nodded reluctantly. "I did that too. I was arrogant and entitled. I thought rules didn't apply to me because Dad had money to fix any problems I created." Richard looked uncomfortable. "You learned those behaviors from me. I taught you that money could solve any problem, that success meant being better than other people. I was wrong." Felt tears in her eyes. "We all made mistakes, but we're learning to do better." Grace, who had been listening quietly while she knitted in the corner, looked up. "Making mistakes isn't the problem. Everyone makes mistakes. The problem is when people don't learn from their mistakes or try to fix the damage they've caused." "What do you mean?" Emma asked. "I mean that saying sorry isn't enough. If you really want to change, you have to take action to make things right with the people you hurt." Emma thought about this for several days. Finally, she asked her mother to drive her back to her old school. She wanted to apologize to several students she had been cruel to over the years. It was humbling and difficult, but it felt necessary. James decided to volunteer at a local community center, helping younger kids with homework and sports. He discovered that many of these children faced real hardships: poverty, family problems, learning disabilities. But they worked harder than he ever had and complained far less. Richard began meeting with the families of employees who had lost their jobs when his company collapsed. He couldn't give them their jobs back, but he could help them find new opportunities and provide honest references. He also started working with investigators to ensure that any illegal activities in his company were properly exposed and addressed. Joined Grace in volunteering at a local shelter for women and children fleeing domestic violence. She learned to serve meals, organize donations, and listen to stories that put her own problems into perspective. These activities weren't just about making amends. They were about discovering who the family could become when they focused on helping others instead of accumulating wealth. But the real test came when the lawyers presented them with their final options. They could declare bankruptcy and lose almost everything but keep the house, or they could sell everything, pay their debts completely, and start over with a clean slate but no assets. "If we keep the house, we'll be house poor," Richard explained. "We'll have this beautiful mansion but no money to maintain it, no money for college tuition, no money for emergencies. If we sell everything, we'll have to find a small apartment and start completely over, but we won't owe anyone anything." The family spent several days discussing their options. Grace listened, but didn't offer advice this time. This was a decision they had to make together. Emma was the first to speak during their decision-making dinner. "I vote for selling everything. I want us to start fresh. I want to earn things instead of just inheriting them." James agreed. I think it would be good for us to live more simply. I want to see if we can be happy without all the expensive stuff. Looked at Richard. What do you think? Richard was quiet for a long moment. I built this empire because I wanted to give my family security and opportunities, but I think I created a prison instead. I vote for freedom, even if it means starting over. Nodded, then we sell everything and start fresh. That night, after the children had gone to bed, and Richard sat with Grace in the kitchen. Grace, you've been with us for 15 years, said. If we sell the house and move to a small apartment, we won't be able to afford your salary anymore. You've already sacrificed so much to help our family. We'll give you excellent references and help you find a position with a family that can pay you what you deserve. Grace smiled and shook her head. Mrs., you still don't understand. I'm not working for your money. I'm working for your family. If you're willing to live simply, I can live simply too. We can figure out a way to make it work. Richard stared at her. Grace, you could work for any wealthy family in the city. Why would you stay with us when we can barely pay you? Because for the first time in years, this family is worth fighting for, Grace replied. You're becoming the people I always hoped you could be. Why would I leave now? As they prepared for bed that night, and Richard talked about their fears and hopes for the future. They were scared about starting over at their age, worried about their children's adjustment, and uncertain about their ability to live without the luxuries they had known for so long. But they were also excited about the possibility of building something real together, something based on love and mutual respect rather than money and status. The next morning, woke up early and found Grace in the garden. The older woman was picking vegetables she had planted months earlier, something the family had never paid attention to before. Grace, can I help? Asked. Of course, Mrs. As they worked together in the early morning light, finally asked the question that had been on her mind for days. Grace, why did you slap me with the truth that day? You could have lost your job, you could have made everything worse. Why did you take that risk? Grace straightened up and looked at with eyes full of compassion and strength. Because sometimes love means taking risks. Sometimes caring about someone means making them angry in order to wake them up. I watched this family dying slowly, and I couldn't stand by and let it happen without at least trying to help. Felt tears in her eyes as she understood the depth of Grace's commitment to their family. You saved us, Grace. You literally saved our family. Grace smiled and handed a basket of fresh vegetables. No, Mrs., you saved yourselves. I just helped you remember who you really are underneath all those expensive clothes and fancy things. The process of dismantling their old life was both heartbreaking and liberating. Estate sale companies came to appraise artwork, furniture, and collectibles that had once defined the family's status. Found herself surprised by how little emotional attachment she felt to most of these expensive objects. I remember buying this painting at an auction in Paris, told Emma as they watched appraisers examine a piece that had cost $200,000. I thought it would make us seem sophisticated and cultured, but I never actually looked at it after we hung it on the wall. Emma studied the painting, seeing it clearly for the first time. It's actually kind of ugly, isn't it? They laughed together and realized that letting go of things was easier than she had expected. What was harder was facing the people who had been part of their old life. The country club where they had been members for 20 years asked them to settle their outstanding bills before their membership was terminated. Former friends stopped calling or returning their messages. Business associates who had once competed for Richard's attention now treated him like he was invisible. It hurts, confided to Grace as they packed boxes in what had been her walk-in closet. These people acted like they cared about us, but they only cared about our money. Grace folded one of his expensive dresses carefully. That's painful, but it's also valuable information. Now you know who your real friends are. The real friends turned out to be few in number, but their loyalty meant everything. Doctor's college roommate who had become a pediatrician offered emotional support and practical help. She had never been impressed by the wealth and had maintained her friendship with despite their different lifestyles. I'm proud of you, told over coffee in a simple diner instead of their usual expensive restaurant. You're becoming yourself again, the person I remember from college who cared more about people than possessions. James found unexpected support from his high school soccer coach, Mr., who had always treated him like any other student despite his family's wealth. When James explained what was happening, Coach offered him a part-time job helping with youth soccer programs. "I've been waiting for you to grow up," Coach said bluntly. "This might be exactly what you needed to become a real person instead of a spoiled rich kid." Emma discovered that her best friend Sarah had always felt uncomfortable with the lifestyle, but had never said anything because she didn't want to lose the friendship. Now that money was no longer part of the equation, their relationship became deeper and more honest. Richard struggled the most with the social changes. His entire identity had been built around business success and financial achievement. Without those markers of status, he felt lost and uncertain about his value as a person. "I don't know how to introduce myself anymore," he confided to his family during one of their evening talks. "For 30 years, I've been Richard, CEO and founder of Industries. Who am I if I'm not that?" James, who had been quiet during most of these discussions, surprised everyone with his insight. "Maybe you're just Richard, husband and father. Maybe that's enough." Grace, who had been mending clothes in the corner, looked up. "Mister, you've spent so many years building a business reputation that you forgot to build a personal reputation. What kind of man do you want to be known as?" This question led to long conversations about values, character, and the difference between success and accomplishment. Richard began to understand that his business achievements, while impressive, had not necessarily made him a better person or a happier man. The family had decided to sell the mansion to a tech entrepreneur who wanted to turn it into a corporate retreat center. The sale would provide enough money to pay off all debts and leave them with a modest amount to start their new life. Finding a new home was an adventure in itself. They looked at apartments and small houses in middle-class neighborhoods, places the children had never imagined living. Everything seemed tiny compared to their mansion, but also cozy and manageable. Grace came with them on these house-hunting trips, offering practical advice about storage, maintenance, and neighborhood dynamics. Her input was valuable because she understood how to make a small space functional and comfortable. "This kitchen is smaller than our pantry at home," Emma observed during one apartment viewing. "This apartment is smaller than my old bedroom," James added. Grace smiled. "But notice how the kitchen opens to the living room. The family can cook together and still be part of conversations. In your old house, the kitchen was so far from everything else that whoever was cooking was isolated from the family." They eventually found a 3-bedroom apartment in a diverse neighborhood with good schools and public transportation. It was clean, affordable, and full of natural light. More importantly, it felt like a place where they could build a real life together. The final weeks in the mansion were emotional. Found herself saying goodbye to rooms where her children had played, where she had hosted parties, where she had dreamed of growing old with Richard. But she also remembered the loneliness, the pressure, and the constant worry about maintaining an image. Emma and James took turns picking out a few special items to keep: photo albums, childhood mementos, and books that had actual sentimental value. They were surprised to discover how few possessions truly mattered to them. Richard spent his last days in his home office, organizing files and preparing for his transition to a much simpler life. He had accepted a position as a financial consultant for small businesses, work that would use his experience, but without the pressure and risk of running his own empire. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the staff who had worked for them for years. The gardener, the housekeeper, the cook. These people had been part of their daily lives, and letting them go felt like losing family members. "You gave us all excellent references and generous severance," the head gardener told Richard. "But more than that, you treated us with respect during this difficult time. That means a lot." Realized that their treatment of employees during this crisis had become a test of their character. They could have cut corners, blamed others, or ignored the human cost of their financial collapse. Instead, they had chosen to prioritize the people who had served their family faithfully. Grace was the only staff member who chose to stay with them, but even her role would change dramatically. In their new apartment, there would be no need for a full-time housekeeper. Instead, Grace would work part-time while also taking care of her own elderly mother, something she had never had time for during her years of constant service to the. Moving day arrived on a rainy Tuesday in October. The mansion looked empty and echoing without furniture, artwork, and the bustling activity of daily life. Professional movers packed their remaining belongings into a much smaller truck than anyone would have expected. Stood in the grand foyer one last time, remembering the first day they had moved into this house 20 years earlier. They had been so proud, so excited about the future they were going to build. Now she felt a different kind of excitement, nervous but hopeful. "Any regrets?" Richard asked, joining her in the empty space where they had once hosted hundreds of guests. "About the money and the status? No," replied honestly. "About the time we lost with each other, yes, but we can't change the past, we can only do better in the future." Grace appeared in the doorway, carrying the last box of personal items. "The truck is loaded and the cleaners are finished. It's time to go." As they drove through the city toward their new neighborhood, the family was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The apartment building looked modest compared to their mansion, but it was well-maintained and surrounded by mature trees. Their new home was on the third floor, with 2 bedrooms for the parents and children, and a small den where Grace would have privacy when she stayed overnight. The living room was tiny, but had large windows that filled the space with light. "It's so quiet," Emma observed as they began unpacking boxes. James opened a window and smiled. "Actually, listen. You can hear kids playing outside, people talking, music from someone's radio. It's not quiet, it's just different sounds." They spent the next several days organizing their new life. Learned to shop for groceries with a strict budget, comparing prices and planning meals in advance. Emma enrolled in a community college to study early childhood education, something she had always been interested in but had never pursued seriously. James started his senior year at a public high school, which required a significant adjustment. He was no longer the wealthy kid who got special treatment. He was just another student who had to earn respect through his actions and character. Richard set up a small home office in the den and began working with his new clients. The work was different from running a corporation, but he found satisfaction in helping small business owners avoid the mistakes he had made. Grace split her time between helping them adjust to their new life and caring for her mother, who lived in a senior housing complex nearby. For the first time in years, Grace had a balanced life that included both work and personal relationships. The first few months in their new home brought many challenges. Burned dinner more often than she succeeded, but the family learned to laugh about culinary disasters and order pizza when necessary. James struggled with being the poor kid at his new school, but gradually made friends who accepted him for who he was rather than what his family owned. Emma discovered that she loved working with children and was good at it. Her volunteer work at a center led to a part-time job that helped pay for her college tuition. Richard found that helping small businesses survive and grow was more satisfying than building a financial empire had ever been. But the biggest change was in their relationships with each other. Living in a small space meant they couldn't avoid each other when problems arose. They had to learn to communicate directly, resolve conflicts quickly, and respect each other's need for privacy even in close quarters. Their evening family talks continued, but now they happened naturally around the dinner table rather than as a scheduled activity. They discussed daily challenges, future plans, and the lessons they were learning about what really mattered in life. One evening, about 6 months after the move, looked around their small living room at her family. Emma was studying for a child development exam. James was helping Richard understand social media marketing for small businesses, and Grace was teaching them all how to play a card game her grandmother had taught her. "I have something I want to tell you all," said, getting everyone's attention. They looked at her with mild concern, worried that she might be having regrets about their new life. "I'm happier now than I've been in 20 years, she said simply. "I feel like I know who you all are as real people, not just as members of my family. I feel useful and needed instead of just decorative. I feel like we're building something meaningful together." Richard nodded slowly. "I miss the financial security and I worry about our future sometimes. But I don't miss the pressure, the constant competition, or the fear of losing everything. Ironically, now that we've lost everything material, I feel less afraid." Emma put down her textbook. "I like who I am now better than who I was before. I like earning things instead of just being given them. I like friends who care about my personality instead of my bank account." James grinned. "I like being challenged. I like knowing that if I succeed at something, it's because I worked hard, not because Dad made a donation to the school." Grace smiled as she shuffled the cards. This family has come so far. You've learned that love isn't something you buy, it's something you build through daily choices to care for each other. Later that night, as prepared for bed in their small but comfortable bedroom, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. The financial crisis that had seemed like the end of their world had actually been the beginning of their real life together. She realized that Grace's confrontation that morning many months ago had been exactly what their family needed. Sometimes love required difficult conversations, uncomfortable truths, and the willingness to risk everything for the chance of something better. The slap of reality that Grace had delivered hadn't destroyed their family. It had saved them from destroying themselves. They had learned that wealth without love was poverty, that success without character was failure, and that a family united in purpose was richer than all the money in the world. As she drifted off to sleep, felt grateful for everything they had lost, because losing those things had helped them find each other. 2 years had passed since the family moved into their modest apartment, and the transformation was remarkable. What started as a desperate attempt to save their relationships had evolved into a genuine renaissance of family bonds and personal growth. Had become an accomplished cook, much to everyone's surprise, including her own. She discovered that she enjoyed the creativity and care involved in preparing meals for people she loved. Her kitchen was tiny compared to the mansion's gourmet space, but it was filled with warmth, conversation, and the aroma of home-cooked food. "Remember when you couldn't even make toast without burning it?" Emma teased her mother one Saturday morning as prepared pancakes for breakfast. "I remember when you thought food just appeared on the table by magic," replied with a laugh. "Now look at you, making dinner for your entire study group last week." Emma had flourished in her early childhood education program. She was in her final semester and had already been offered a position at the center where she had started as a volunteer. Her natural patience and creativity made her excellent with children, and she had discovered a sense of purpose she had never experienced during her privileged but aimless earlier years. James had graduated from high school with honors and received a partial scholarship to study business at a state university. More importantly, he had developed confidence in his ability to succeed through hard work rather than family connections. He worked summers doing construction with some of his school friends, physical labor that built both his muscles and his character. Richard's consulting business had grown steadily. He specialized in helping family businesses navigate financial challenges, drawing on his own experiences with both success and failure. His clients trusted him because he understood the emotional as well as the financial aspects of business problems. Grace continued to work part-time with the family while also caring for her elderly mother. The arrangement allowed her to maintain her independence while remaining connected to the people who had become like family to her. She had also started teaching cooking classes at a community center, sharing skills she had developed over decades of service. But success brought new challenges. As Richard's business grew, he faced the temptation to expand aggressively, to chase bigger clients and larger profits. The family had learned to recognize the warning signs of his old patterns and weren't afraid to address them directly. "Dad, you're starting to sound like the old you," James said during one of their evening conversations. "You're talking about money and growth more than you're talking about the people you're helping." Richard paused, considering his son's observation. "You're right. I can feel myself getting caught up in the excitement of building something big again, but I don't want to make the same mistakes." Grace, who had been listening while working on a crossword puzzle, looked up. "Mister, there's nothing wrong with success as long as you remember what success really means. Is it about making the most money, or is it about doing the most good?" These conversations had become a regular feature of their family life. They had learned to challenge each other lovingly, to speak truth even when it was uncomfortable, and to hold each other accountable for living according to their values rather than their impulses. The neighborhood had embraced the family gradually. At first, some residents were suspicious of the wealthy family who had moved into their middle-class building. Stories about Richard's business collapse had been in the local news, and people weren't sure what to expect. But they proved themselves through their actions. Volunteered at the local food bank, Emma tutored children in the building, James helped elderly neighbors with computer problems, and Richard offered free financial advice to small business owners in the area. Mrs., who lived across the hall, had become particularly close too. She was a widow who had raised 4 children on her own after her husband's death, and she appreciated its willingness to learn from her experiences. "You know," Mrs. told one afternoon as they shared tea, "when you first moved here, I thought you would look down on us. Rich people usually do, but you listen more than you talk, and you ask for help instead of pretending you know everything." Treasured these relationships. She had learned that genuine friendships were built on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than social status or financial advantage. Her conversations with neighbors about child rearing, budgeting, and daily challenges were more meaningful than the superficial socializing she had done in wealthy circles. Emma's graduation from college was a celebration that would have been impossible during their mansion years. Instead of an expensive party with hired caterers and formal invitations, they hosted a potluck dinner in their apartment building's community room. Neighbors brought dishes representing their various cultural backgrounds, creating a feast that was diverse, delicious, and full of genuine warmth. Grace had prepared Emma's favorite cake, a simple chocolate creation that had become a family tradition. As Emma blew out the candles, surrounded by family, friends, and neighbors who truly cared about her success, she felt a depth of satisfaction that no expensive celebration could have provided. "I want to thank everyone who helped me get here," Emma said, looking around the room. "2 years ago, I was a spoiled girl who had never worked for anything in my life. You all taught me that education isn't just about getting a degree. It's about learning how to contribute to your community and care for others." The applause was heartfelt and felt tears in her eyes. Her daughter had become a thoughtful, capable young woman who understood the value of service and the importance of earning respect through actions rather than inheritance. But the evening's most meaningful moment came when Grace stood up to speak. The room fell quiet as the woman who had been the catalyst for the family's transformation prepared to share her thoughts. "I've watched this family change from people who had everything but appreciated nothing to people who have less but enjoy everything," Grace said, her voice strong and clear. "Emma, you become the kind of teacher that children will remember for the rest of their lives. James, you've learned that respect is earned through character, not bought with money. Mr. and Mrs., you've rediscovered how to be partners and parents instead of just providers." She paused, looking at each family member. "But most importantly, you've all learned that love isn't a feeling that just happens. It's a choice you make every day through your actions." Later that evening, as the family cleaned up with help from their neighbors, reflected on how much their definition of success had changed. Emma's graduation represented years of hard work, sacrifice, and genuine achievement. It meant more than any expensive milestone from their previous life. James's progress was equally impressive, though different. He had developed into a young man who combined ambition with humility, who worked hard without expecting special treatment, and who treated everyone with respect regardless of their background or social status. His relationship with his father had evolved from fear and resentment to mutual respect and genuine friendship. They worked together on Richard's business during school breaks, with James contributing fresh ideas about technology and marketing while learning about financial management and client relations. "I'm proud of the man you're becoming," Richard told his son one evening as they reviewed client proposals together. "You have all the drive and intelligence I had at your age, but you also have wisdom about what really matters. That combination will take you far." James smiled. "I learned from watching your mistakes, Dad, but I also learned from watching how you fixed them. That took more courage than making money ever did." These honest conversations had become natural for the family. They no longer avoided difficult topics or pretended that problems didn't exist. They had learned that facing challenges together made them stronger than avoiding challenges ever could. Richard's business philosophy had evolved along with his personal values. Instead of focusing on maximizing profits, he concentrated on helping his clients build sustainable, ethical businesses that contributed positively to their communities. This approach attracted customers who shared his values and created lasting relationships rather than transactional interactions. One of his most meaningful client relationships was with Maria Santos, a single mother who had started a small catering business from her home kitchen. When Maria came to Richard for help, she was struggling with cash flow and uncertain about expansion possibilities. "I don't have money for fancy consultants," Maria had told him during their first meeting. "I just need someone who understands what it's like to worry about paying bills and supporting a family." Richard worked with Maria to develop a sustainable growth plan that didn't require risky debt or unrealistic projections. More importantly, he helped her understand that business success didn't have to come at the expense of family time or personal values. "You remind me that business is about people, not just numbers," Maria told him after 6 months of working together. "You help me make decisions that I can feel good about, not just decisions that make the most money." These client relationships enriched Richard's life in ways that building a billion-dollar empire never had. He felt useful, respected, and connected to his community. His work had meaning beyond financial gain, and his expertise was being used to help others avoid the mistakes he had made. His volunteer work at the women's shelter had also evolved into something more significant. She had started by helping serve meals and organize donations, but her natural empathy and growing wisdom made her an effective counselor for women facing difficult transitions. "You understand what it's like to lose everything and start over," one of the shelter residents told her. "When you tell me things will get better, I believe you because you've been there." Had learned that her experience of losing wealth and status, while different from the challenges faced by women fleeing domestic violence, had given her insights into resilience, adaptation, and the importance of supportive relationships during difficult times. The shelter's director had asked to consider training as a professional counselor, suggesting that her combination of life experience and natural compassion would make her an effective therapist. It was an opportunity was seriously considering as a potential second career. Grace watched all of these developments with satisfaction and pride. The family she had confronted 2 years earlier had been drowning in privilege and isolation. The family she lived with now was thriving through purpose and connection. But Grace also knew that growth wasn't a destination. It was an ongoing process. They had learned important lessons about values, relationships, and authentic success, but they would face new challenges as their circumstances continued to change. Richard's business was becoming successful enough that he would soon need to make decisions about hiring employees and expanding services. Emma would graduate soon and face the challenges of beginning her career and eventually building her own family. James would go to college and encounter new temptations and opportunities. Each of these transitions would test the values and habits the family had developed. Grace's role was evolving from crisis counselor to ongoing mentor, helping them navigate success with the same wisdom they had learned to apply to adversity. "The hardest test is yet to come," Grace told one evening as they prepared dinner together. "You've learned how to handle failure and poverty. Now you'll need to learn how to handle success and prosperity without losing the values you've discovered." Nodded thoughtfully. "I think we're different people now, Grace. I don't think we'll make the same mistakes again." "You're stronger now," Grace agreed. "But strength needs to be tested regularly or it weakens over time. The key is to keep remembering where you came from and why you changed." As the family gathered for dinner that evening, looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. They were sitting in a simple apartment, eating food she had cooked herself, discussing dreams and challenges with honesty and mutual support. 5 years had passed since Grace Washington first confronted in that grand bedroom, and the ripple effects of that single moment of courage continued to transform lives far beyond the family. Richard's consulting firm had grown into a respected practice that specialized in ethical business recovery and sustainable growth strategies. He employed 6 full-time consultants and had helped hundreds of small businesses navigate challenges without compromising their values. His reputation was built not on wealth accumulation, but on integrity and results that benefited entire communities. The most significant test of Richard's transformation came when a large corporation offered to buy his consulting practice for $15 million. The offer would have restored the family's financial status overnight, but it came with conditions that troubled Richard deeply. "They want me to expand into bankruptcy consulting," Richard explained to his family during their traditional evening discussion. "The money would be incredible, but I'd be helping large corporations exploit legal loopholes to avoid paying their debts to small suppliers and employees." Now completing her master's degree in counseling psychology, immediately understood the ethical dilemma. "That's exactly the kind of business practice that caused our problems in the first place." Emma, who had been promoted to assistant director at her center, and was engaged to a fellow teacher named David, spoke up. "Dad, remember what Grace taught us about success. Is this about making the most money or doing the most good?" James, now a junior in college studying sustainable business practices, was more direct. "You'd be helping rich companies hurt poor people. How is that different from what you used to do?" Grace, who now split her time between the family and teaching business ethics at a community college, smiled as she listened to the conversation. "Mister, what does your heart tell you?" Richard looked around at his family, these people whose respect meant more to him than any amount of money. "My heart tells me that some opportunities cost more than they pay." He declined the offer and instead partnered with a nonprofit organization to provide free consulting services to minority-owned businesses and women entrepreneurs. The decision meant less money but more meaningful work that aligned with his values. The partnership led to unexpected opportunities. Richard was invited to speak at business schools about ethical leadership and sustainable growth. His story of losing billions and finding purpose resonated with students who were entering a business world increasingly focused on social responsibility. "The most important question any can ask," Richard told audiences, "isn't how much money can I make? It's what kind of person will I become by making this money? Because if you become someone you don't respect, all the money in the world won't make you happy." His journey into professional counseling had been equally transformative. She specialized in helping women who had experienced major life transitions, whether through divorce, financial loss, career changes, or other upheavals. Her combination of personal experience and professional training made her uniquely effective. One of her most challenging cases involved helping a woman named whose husband had gambled away their family's savings and disappeared, leaving her with 3 young children and enormous debts. His ability to understand the shame, fear, and confusion of sudden financial catastrophe made her the perfect counselor for situation. "When you first told me that losing everything might be the beginning of finding myself, I thought you were crazy," said during one of their sessions. "But you were right. I'm stronger now than I ever was when I was depending on someone else to take care of me." Success as a counselor led to opportunities to train other therapists in crisis intervention techniques. She developed workshops that helped professionals understand the psychological impact of financial trauma and the importance of addressing shame and identity issues alongside practical concerns. Emma's career in early childhood education had blossomed in ways she never expected. Her natural gift for connecting with children, combined with her understanding of how privileged backgrounds could create emotional problems, made her an advocate for comprehensive child development programs. She had started an innovative program at her center that brought together children from different economic backgrounds, creating learning environments where wealthy and poor children could learn from each other. The program attracted attention from education researchers and led to speaking engagements at conferences nationwide. "Children from privileged families often struggle with empathy and resilience," Emma explained to a gathering of early childhood educators. "When they interact regularly with children who face real challenges, they develop emotional intelligence and strength they can't learn from books or expensive programs." Emma's engagement to David represented the kind of relationship she never could have built during her wealthy years. David was a special education teacher who valued kindness over status, substance over style. Their relationship was built on shared values and mutual respect rather than financial compatibility. Grace had played an important role in helping Emma understand healthy relationships. "Love isn't about finding someone who can give you everything you want," Grace had counseled. "It's about finding someone who brings out the best version of yourself." James had chosen to attend a state university rather than an expensive private college, partly for financial reasons, but mainly because he wanted to earn his achievements rather than inherit them. His major in sustainable business practices combined his natural analytical abilities with his family's hard-learned values about ethical success. During his junior year, James started a student organization focused on supporting small businesses in the local community. The group provided free marketing, accounting, and technology services to entrepreneurs who couldn't afford professional consultants. "My father taught me that business skills are tools," James explained to his organization's members. "Tools can be used to build something beautiful or to tear something down. We get to choose how we use our abilities." James's work caught the attention of his professors and led to research opportunities studying the impact of student-community partnerships on local economic development. His senior thesis project involved creating a replicable model for university-based small business support programs. Grace's influence had extended far beyond the family. Her evening classes at the community college, where she taught practical life skills and wisdom gained through decades of experience, had become legendary among students. Mrs. Washington doesn't just teach us how to manage money or cook healthy meals, one student wrote in an evaluation. She teaches us how to live with dignity and purpose, no matter what challenges we face. Grace's classes attracted a diverse group of students. Young parents learning to manage households on tight budgets, recent immigrants adapting to American life, and people in career transition seeking practical skills and emotional support. But Grace's most important role remained her ongoing relationship with the family. She had evolved from employee to friend to family member, and her presence provided continuity and wisdom as each family member faced new challenges and opportunities. The family's apartment had become a gathering place for friends, colleagues, and neighbors who were drawn to the warmth and authenticity they found there. Study group met there weekly, Richard's business partners came for dinner regularly, Emma brought children from her for holiday parties, and James's college friends visited during breaks. Grace often reflected on how different these gatherings were from the formal parties the family used to host in their mansion. These events were smaller, simpler, and infinitely more meaningful. People came because they wanted to be there, not because they felt obligated or hoped to gain some advantage. The family's influence spread through their community in countless small ways. Counseling work helped stabilize families facing crises. Richard's consulting practice strengthened dozens of small businesses. Emma's educational innovations improved outcomes for hundreds of children. James's student organization supported community economic development. But perhaps their most important contribution was simply modeling an alternative way of defining success and happiness. They demonstrated that it was possible to lose wealth without losing dignity, to face failure without losing hope, and to start over without losing family connections. The neighborhood where they lived had been transformed partly through their influence and example. Property values had risen not because of gentrification, but because residents had worked together to improve schools, support local businesses, and create a stronger sense of community. Mrs., who had become one of his closest friends, often commented on the changes she had witnessed. "When you moved here, I thought rich people couldn't learn to live like regular people. But you didn't just learn to live like us, you helped all of us live better." On the 5th anniversary of their move to the apartment, the family decided to host a celebration that would honor not just their own journey, but also the people who had supported them along the way. They invited neighbors, clients, students, and friends for an evening of food, music, and storytelling. Grace insisted on cooking her famous fried chicken and cornbread, recipes that had become family favorites. Prepared several dishes she had mastered over the years, Emma brought homemade cookies decorated by children from her, and James organized games and activities that brought people of all ages together. Richard stood before the gathered crowd to offer a toast, but his words were directed primarily at Grace, who was standing modestly in the back of the room. "5 years ago, a wise woman told my family some hard truths we didn't want to hear. She risked her job, her security, and our anger because she cared more about our than her own comfort. Everything good that has happened to us since then started with her courage to speak truth to people who needed to hear it." The room fell quiet as Richard continued. "Grace, you didn't just save our family, you taught us how to save ourselves. You showed us that love sometimes means making people uncomfortable in order to wake them up. You proved that wisdom and character matter more than wealth and status." Grace wiped tears from her eyes as the room erupted in applause, joined Richard, taking Grace's hand. "Grace, you've been our teacher, our counselor, our friend, and our family. We want to ask you something important," said, her voice shaking with emotion. Emma and James joined their parents, forming a circle around Grace. Emma spoke next. "Grace, we want you to know that you'll always have a home with us no matter what happens, not as an employee but as family. Will you let us take care of you the way you've taken care of us?" Grace looked at these 4 people who had become the most important relationships in her life. She thought about her daughter Sarah, who would have loved seeing how this family had learned to love each other. She thought about her late husband, who had taught her that courage meant standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. "I already am family," Grace said simply. "That's what I've been trying to teach you. Family isn't about blood or money or obligation. Family is about people who choose to love each other through good times and bad times, who tell each other the truth even when it hurts, and who never give up on each other." She looked around the room at the diverse group of people who had gathered to celebrate with them. "And look what you've created here. This isn't just a party, it's a community. You've learned that success isn't about accumulating things for yourself. It's about contributing to something bigger than yourself." As the evening continued, people shared stories about how the family had influenced their lives. Small business owners talked about Richard's guidance. Women spoke about counseling support. Parents praised Emma's work with their children. Students described James's mentorship. But the most moving testimony came from the woman had counseled through her own financial crisis. "2 years ago, I was homeless with 3 children, convinced that my life was over," said, addressing the crowd. "Didn't just help me find housing and work. She helped me understand that losing everything I thought I needed allowed me to discover everything I actually needed." Paused, looking at her children who were playing happily with other kids in the room. "My children are growing up with values I never could have taught them if we hadn't lost our money. They're learning that security comes from loving relationships and personal strength, not from bank accounts and possessions." Late that night, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were cleaned, the family sat together in their small living room. It had been a perfect evening, full of love, laughter, and genuine connection. "Grace," said quietly, "do you remember what you asked me that morning 5 years ago? You asked if I loved my family enough to fight for them." Grace nodded, remembering that desperate woman who had been disappearing into depression and despair. "I want to ask you the same question now, but differently. We love you enough to fight for you. Will you let us?" Grace smiled, understanding that her role in this family had come full circle. She had started as their employee, become their teacher, and now was being invited to be their beloved family member. "Yes," she said simply, "but you have to promise me something in return." "Anything," the family said in unison. "Promise me that you'll keep telling each other the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Promise me that you'll never let money or success make you forget what really matters. Promise me that you'll use your gifts to help others the way you've been helped." As they made this promise together, Grace thought about the single slap of truth she had delivered 5 years earlier. That moment of courage had saved a family, but it had also created a ripple effect of positive change that would continue spreading for generations to come. Sometimes, Grace reflected, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let people destroy themselves. Sometimes saving someone means making them angry at you temporarily in order to wake them up permanently. The family had learned that real wealth came from loving relationships, meaningful work, and the knowledge that their lives made a positive difference in the world. They had discovered that true success meant becoming people they could respect rather than accumulating things that others would envy. And it all started with one woman who cared enough to speak truth to power, to risk everything for the chance of something better, and to prove that love sometimes means saying the hardest things in the gentlest way possible. 2 years earlier, they had been living in luxury but dying emotionally. Now they had less money but more of everything that actually mattered. Grace's intervention had saved more than their family, it had saved their souls. As they walked back to the house together, realized that for the first time in years, she was looking forward to the future instead of dreading it tense. They talked about their fears, their anger, and their confusion. It wasn't a magical solution, but it was a beginning.